I sold it. Honestly, I sold it to a live audience that uses the product on a daily basis.
Yeah. You don't really make much money, right? And even if you do manage to earn something, it's typically not a significant amount at all.
We started with one product, then they rebranded to 1-inch network.
Man, you've been working with hardware for so many years. And what could you do for the crypto world?
Hello everyone, dear friends. You're on the Axiomica channel. Today we're filming an interview with a very interesting person. With each episode, things are getting more and more interesting. Today, our guest is Alexey Devyatkin, founder of the 1-inch hardware wallet project. Let's get to know him.
Could you please take a moment to share some details about yourself, perhaps including your background, experiences, and what brings you here today? We are very interested in learning more about who you are and what makes you unique. Yes, so tell me, who exactly are you? Yes, we all understand now there are some big credentials. Both I and the audience are interested to hear who you are, where you came from, what your background is. Because seeing the entire and complete picture online, that now Alexey is this and that, it's truly quite cool. But it's even better to find out what your background really was and what difficult path you took. But I think this will be especially interesting for everyone. Actually, I grew up, I was born and raised in Russia, basically. I went to a regular school in a small town, then enrolled at a university in Novosibirsk. That was NSTU, Novosibirsk State Technical University. I entered the Department of Radio Engineering, Electronics and Physics. Well, the choice was actually obvious because I was obsessed with electronics since childhood. Everything related to it. My dad's soldering iron moved from the garage to my bedroom. Yes, it moved home to my bedroom, onto my desk, probably when I was about 8 years old. And basically it stayed there until I finished school. That's how it was. After finishing school, accordingly, I didn't hesitate. I never had that feeling of not knowing where I wanted to go to study. So basically, I knew for sure that I would dedicate a significant part of my life to working with electronics. I just didn't know exactly which field, but I really enjoyed making things with my hands and seeing them work. I was especially interested in development, in particular the development of electronics. That was what interested me most, which is why I went to university to learn how to do it properly. Actually, while I was studying at university, I never stopped working with my hands. And basically, it turned out that for 3 years, while studying, I also worked in a workshop repairing mobile phones, tablets, and cameras. In general, I would put it this way. The technologies that are on the cutting edge, basically everything used in mobile phones, I consider that to be the very frontier of technology. And every day I encountered it firsthand. And because of that, I developed, I would say, a very keen eye for how devices should be properly and well designed and built. That's it. After graduating from university, I stopped doing repairs. I thought, well, now I have a degree, it's time to work in my field. So I started working as a regular developer. But actually, when I started working as a developer, after about a year and a half, I realized that, yeah, okay, I like everything, but I was missing some kind of action because, well, you have to understand that while I was working in mobile phone repair, it was daily interaction with people. There was always something going on, something interesting. Like sometimes you had to go somewhere, for example, to get spare parts or something else. Yeah, there was a lot of active networking, a lot of communication. And when I started working in an office, 5 days a week with 2 days off, spending 8 hours a day in the office, it was honestly, I'd say, almost painful for me. I really wanted some kind of activity, some interaction. So in the end, the only real relief for me was when they sent me out somewhere to find something. It felt like a relief, like a breath of fresh air. Eventually I quit and my uncle invited me to go to China with him. And basically from that moment on, you could say my life changed a bit.
An active life?
An active life, yes. So in general, I decided that I needed to do business, to have my own thing. That was really what drove me, what inspired me at that time. And from that moment on, I would say I went through 4 startups. Overall, there were all sorts of interesting projects. Yeah. And as of today, this is already the 5th startup in my life. Of course, some of those startups, for example, the first one didn't make it. You could say I developed the product almost single-handedly. It was rooftop taxi screens, LED advertising displays. By the way, there was a notable project in the fall of 2014 where we successfully installed a total of 60 screens. This significant undertaking was carried out in 2 distinct cities, Kazan and Ijevsk. We didn't make it to Ufa, though there was supposed to be a launch there as well. So in the end, we installed them in 2 cities, and then somehow the project started to fizzle out, just fade away, and then the Chinese stole the design basically, and everything just started to go sideways. So in short, the project kind of died. Well, anyway, that's one of the startups I launched. I wasn't a founder there, but they invited me as someone who could build everything from scratch. So I joined when basically there was just an idea, and maybe a few individual components had been developed, but nothing else existed yet. This is a Novosibirsk-based company called Vakio. They produce ventilation systems. And in 2017, under my leadership with the team, we developed the product and brought it to market. And to this day, it is being manufactured and released by this company and is actively being sold. That's it. So that's a bit about my background. There were other startups, of course, but they didn't take off. Basically, as we know from statistics, out of 10 startups, only 2 succeed. So basically, that's the picture I have, more or less.
So this is indeed your 5th wedding anniversary, isn't that right?
I think so, yes, the 5th anniversary. Overall, I've gained quite a bit of experience during this time, and I think this is where the rule they use in Silicon Valley really starts to apply. That is, investors are more likely to invest in projects whose founders already have startup experience. And the more startups they've launched, the more attractive these teams and founders become to investors because they accumulate experience, not just in what to do, but also in what not to do. And with each subsequent, roughly speaking, with each new iteration, the chances of success, the probability of success, let's call it, keep getting higher and higher. Well, in my own case, I can also see that this is true. I've learned a lot during this period, things like team selection, management, in other words, a kind of overall management skill. As we know, a startup isn't a place of chaos. Rather, a startup is, I would say, a team working under conditions of extreme uncertainty. That is, when we don't know exactly what product needs to be made or whether it will take off or not. But at the same time, a certain level of systematic management is still necessary. No one has cancelled that.
Yeah, true.
And you had to, so to speak, develop it. You had to learn how to do it right because a team is a living organism. And it's not like you can just say, that's it, the team is now stable, it's working. It's probably an endless process. Well, it's like being in a relationship with a woman, isn't it?
I agree.
Hello, this is the Axiom channel. Our company develops Web3 products for businesses, and we address a wide range of issues related to the tokenization of your business and other products. We develop smart contracts, launch blockchain projects, and of course share our expertise through our YouTube channel so you can understand what cryptocurrency is. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated on news and new releases. This is Axiom.
So now there is a clear understanding, focus, and direction. Now moving on to that, I'd really like to know, could you please tell me how you got involved with 1inch? What is 1inch and what exactly do you do there? Because as I understand it, in my view, 1inch is a large ecosystem of products, right? Because I remember that the guys started with a single product, then they rebranded to 1inch Network, released their own wallet, right?
Yes.
And now they're adding different products.
Yes, of course. So if I tell you a bit about 1inch and how I actually got there, let me probably start with the first part. What is 1inch? 1inch originally is, well, essentially today it is still a company that is a startup. So as of today, the company is about 4 years old and it was born at a hackathon in Denver. The founders are Sergey Kuntz and Anton Bukov. We created this system at the hackathon in Denver, and in fact, at that time, no one really understood it. They didn't win a prize with this product, so to speak, but surprisingly, it started to grow very rapidly. Basically, 1inch was originally an aggregator of decentralized exchanges. In other words, it aggregates liquidity from all available sources, so to speak, and helps users make swaps.
So am I right in thinking it's like the Avia Sales of its own system? So roughly speaking, if Avia Sales has its own ticket suppliers, it's the same thing here, right?
Yes, of course, absolutely. Actually, that's a perfectly accurate comparison. In this case, 1inch acts exactly as an aggregator, collecting information from all decentralized exchanges where there are liquidity pools. So when a user comes in with a large amount of some tokens and wants to swap them for others, essentially, under the hood of the aggregator, there's a router that searches for the best routes. For example, If the amount is 1,000 tokens, it splits this amount and swaps it across different sources on different exchanges, and then packages everything into a single transaction. So essentially the user sees that the swap operation was completed in just a few seconds, but under the hood it could have worked like a spider with a spreading web, gathering the required amount from dozens or even hundreds of liquidity sources to execute the swap, and all of this is packaged into a single transaction. In reality,
And that's really awesome.
an amazing product. And basically, when the guys first built it, nobody really understood it. But after the hackathon in Denver, this product started to gain users very quickly through word of mouth. And at that moment, when in just 2 weeks a significant number of users had already appeared, again, according to the guys' own subjective estimates, there were hundreds or maybe even thousands of users. It just started spreading through Telegram. That's when they realized, yes, they had found their product and that it was worth focusing on and continuing to develop it. So they invited some guys. Basically, when they started working on it, you could say that 2.5 people were developing it. That is, it was just the two of them, Sergey and Anton. And they also brought in Misha Melnik, who was helping them part-time to build the product. Within a year, they had built a solid working product and actually started attracting investment for it. And today, 1inch has really become an entire ecosystem. They're developing a lot of different products now, not just the aggregator itself. This includes 1inch Wallet, which is a mobile wallet. There's also Hot Wallet, and right now they're working on an NFT marketplace. 1inch Pro is a product designed for institutional clients. So overall, there's a lot going on, including our project, the 1inch hardware wallet, which is a cold wallet for DeFi. But in this case, we actually operate as a separate company, as an independent company that develops hardware. Still, we are part of the 1inch ecosystem, and we're specifically creating the product under the 1inch brand. But overall, we have a separate legal entity and a completely independent team with our own investors and, so to speak, our own product marketing department and sales department. And well, since we're making hardware, we also organize the manufacturing ourselves. So in this case, the experience I've gained over all this time working on startups, and to some extent in business as well, I've also learned about sales because for the last couple of years after working on startups, I was involved in commercial development. All of this is proving to be extremely useful and highly beneficial now because essentially, as a dedicated founder and a visionary CEO, my primary task is to meticulously build a fully integrated and comprehensive company from the initial conceptual idea. Then the very next crucial stage is product development and refinement, and finally, the essential processes of manufacturing and sales.
The blockchain era is developing at a rather fast pace. At Axiomica, we are engaged in the development of crypto projects. We develop blockchain projects of any complexity, from online exchanges to decentralized solutions. We also help companies conduct IDO and ICO rounds, and we have a strong understanding of marketing. So if you need blockchain project development, you can submit a request on our website. The link is below this video. So how did you get into this ecosystem? I mean, well, everyone has their own path. I understand that you weren't there at the very beginning of 1inch, right?
No, actually, I wasn't there at the start. It's a very interesting story. Sergey Kuntz and I have actually known each other for a very long time, since kindergarten. We grew up in the same village, went to the same kindergarten, and went to school together. We were very close friends until 6th grade when he moved to Germany. So in 6th grade, he left to live in Germany. And roughly speaking, for about 20 years, our paths diverged. Of course, we kept in touch as much as was possible back then. And I would say, by a stroke of luck, at some point I created a new Instagram account, and since I had Sergey's phone number saved for a long time, his account popped up in my recommendations. So I went to his page, looked around, saw some food photos, and wrote to Sergey. I said, "Oh, Seryoga, hi." I said, "Did you become a gourmet critic or something?" I said, so many food photos. So he wrote back to me, "Oh, Leka, hi, let's catch up sometime." Like, it's been ages since we last saw each other. Honestly, we hadn't seen each other in 20 years. Well, over that...
That's a long time, right?
Yeah, that's a long time. Actually, we did see each other after he moved to live in Germany. He came to visit when we finished 9th grade. So we were about 15 years old, and after that, we would occasionally call each other, roughly speaking. And that was, I would say, probably a fateful, decisive, life-changing meeting after such a long time. So we called each other and ended up chatting for about 2 hours, maybe even more. And well, he told me he was working on a startup and asked me what I was up to. Well, basically, he knew since childhood because we used to invent things together. Mopeds, bicycles, all sorts of electronic gadgets. We made them together. So in general, he had known about my passion and interest in electronics for a long time. So he asked what I was up to. I told him, well, honestly, the same old stuff. So I'm working on electronics development. He said, wow, that's awesome. Come to Lisbon.
Interesting, right? Over the phone and suddenly it's straight to Lisbon.
Yeah, literally days after he messaged me, come to Lisbon. So without thinking about that, basically, I already had an opportunity at that point. He asked me how much time I had. I said, I didn't even have a visa.
Listen, that's really fast. You need to get a visa and all. You really have to hustle to even get there.
Yeah, at that moment, honestly, I don't know. For me, there are no obstacles, but there's simply a task to do. I realized that I would find a way to make it happen because I had a huge desire to do it. So in the end, 10 days was enough to get a visa and go. And so we met in Lisbon at the Lisbon conference. And that was basically the first time I saw what the life of a startup looked like in person. And for me, it was like a whole new world opened up. We had some really close conversations there in terms of how, in general, you can actually build projects. So for me, it was kind of an expansion of the boundaries of my thinking because most startup founders run into the same problem. Where do you get the money to test out a particular hypothesis or idea that's living somewhere in your head? Well, because we're people and we live in a material world. And overall, having gone through 4 startups, I know what it's like to grind away at a startup when you're not making any money. And even if you are, it's not much.
It's not enough.
And it's not enough. And whatever little you do make, you end up putting it back into your project. So basically, I know this better than anyone else. And that's why at some point I told myself, stop, that's it. No more startups in my life. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to live a normal, fulfilling life, to be someone who has money. And in that sense, everything is good. And so when I arrived in Lisbon, Sergey introduced me to various representatives of venture funds and showed me that startups can be done differently. And we actively discussed what ideas everyone had in general. And he said to me, man, you've been working with hardware for so many years. What could you do for the crypto world? And honestly, at that moment, he really hit the nail on the head. I resisted the idea for a long time. I have a lot of friends in Kazan. Those who I would say are involved with crypto, let's call them cryptonites, right? From the crypto community. And they also, seeing what I do, what I make, what devices I create, they would say, man, we use cold wallets, but seriously, make a proper wallet. We don't like any of these ones. And I would say, no, guys, this smells like a startup. No, thank you.
I'm not getting into that again.
Yeah, I'm not getting into it. Bitter experience, and I just don't want to deal with it anymore. So I put that idea aside, well, for about half a year, I guess. And it wasn't until I went to Lisbon. And when we were in Lisbon, Sergey and I were talking, and he asked me, what could you do? I said, well, Sergey, honestly, the only thing that comes to mind right now, if I were to do something for blockchain, it would probably be to make a proper cold wallet. He said, exactly, bingo, right on the mark. He said, Anton and I have also been thinking about making our own crypto wallet for a long time because we don't like any of the ones out there. We just couldn't find someone we could trust, someone who would really take the lead on this project and start developing it. So in general, honestly, a lot of people might sometimes wonder, like, okay, so I basically got in through connections.
Classmates.
Yeah, classmates and so on. I agree. Yeah, maybe it's, as they say, a matter of circumstances. It's a kind of advanced level of trust that you have in a person when you invite them to do something. At that time, I was given a grant and basically sent off on my own. I mean, to put it simply, they said, here's the money, go do it. So it's not like anyone really helped me out much. There definitely wasn't anything like that. And I said, okay, I'll go and do it.
Awesome.
And I really did have more than enough, though I don't particularly like to boast or brag about my accomplishments. But at that precise moment in time, I do indeed give myself significant credit. I profoundly realized that by that specific time, which was a little over a year and a half ago, I already possessed the comprehensive knowledge, the essential skills, and fundamentally the inherent strength and resilience I truly needed to succeed and thrive. I was confident that I could do it. At that time, I was still alone. I faced the major challenge of assembling a team for this project and
To build a wallet,
yes, and to build a wallet, at the very least, to make
an MVP.
an MVP, yes. So I was given a small grant, and with that grant, we built the MVP. This is exactly, if we go back to that question, okay, an introduction is good, but in any case, it's a kind of advanced level of trust, which either gets justified or not. So roughly speaking, in this case, the guys just gave me a grant. They bought a lottery ticket, and the result was absolutely, I would say, unknown and unexpected in this situation. But since I'm that kind of person, we actually made an MVP and we showed it. The first MVP appeared after 6 months, and we presented it in Paris.
Can we please show a brief video of the minimum viable product in our upcoming episode?
Yes, of course. I think we'll provide it, with the guys. So we made our first MVP. It was huge, but at the very least, it could already sign a transaction. It connected to MetaMask. And overall, it was kind of a confirmation that yes, it works. So in 6 months, we managed to get into the topic pretty quickly and build the first working prototype, which we could show actually worked, signed transactions, and performed its core function. That's it. Another 6 months later, we had already built the first engineering sample. That is, it looked and still looks now exactly as it was originally envisioned in the drawing.
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
That's awesome.
Exactly the same, yes. So it's already working now. We proudly showcased it in Denver, Colorado. That was specifically at the very end of February, just before the onset of March, and it was a truly remarkable event.
This year?
Yes, this year. We presented our engineering prototype. So this is actually the first version, the first generation of our device. And accordingly, after that, I can sum up that the level of trust has definitely increased even more because in addition to the initial advanced trust, now a little over a year since there was only an idea on a slide in my presentation, which I prepared before applying for the grant. Actually, if we delve a bit into the topic of the grant, everything there followed the standard procedure. That is, I would say there was nothing like me being somehow overly privileged. I went through the exact same process as everyone else. So I prepared a presentation, I prepared a roadmap basically, I calculated the budget and did everything we were supposed to do. I put all of that together and applied for the grant under the same conditions as everyone else. After the application was reviewed for a month, it was approved. After that, I received the grant and started working on the project. That's it. So once we had built the engineering prototype, the level of trust increased even more, and as a result, we started attracting investors to continue developing the project. Because right now, the entire project faces a truly significant and major challenge to successfully release a robust device that is completely ready for mass production and to effectively launch its sales. Therefore, as the dedicated CEO and the original founder, I would confidently say that I have several absolutely crucial and key tasks immediately ahead of me. The first, of course, is to develop the product. Naturally, as someone with a fairly deep and extensive technical background, I am directly and actively involved with the dedicated development team to meticulously ensure that the product ultimately turns out precisely the way I originally envision it, with all its intended features and functionalities. Because in fact, at the very beginning, well, maybe we didn't have the most super duper, incredibly polished design, but that initial design concept came directly from my own creative head, and working closely together with the talented designer, we meticulously created a few detailed renders. And in fact, just about a year later, that very same conceptual render miraculously turned into a tangible, real, and fully functional physical device that now actually exists and is in operation.
Well, it's actually cool that you built it and made it exactly one-to-one, because in my experience, even if we move away from the production side of things, we see that a website design is made one way. But when it comes to delivery, it works differently. There's a disconnect in perception, and it's the same for designers with renovations. It's really great that you managed to strike that golden mean, where all expectations were met.
Yes, in fact, we managed to make everything exactly one-to-one, except perhaps for the thickness. We had to make the device 1 millimeter thicker. Initially, we planned for the device to be in the form factor of a bank card, equipped with an e-ink display with a 2.7-inch touchscreen, and of course, a small battery and wireless charging. So if we talk a bit about the technical specifications, the device has, it's a full air gap. In other words, as they say, it's a completely air-gapped device. And that means there's no USB, no Bluetooth on board, no Wi-Fi, and no internet on this device. This is a purely cold wallet whose sole purpose is to securely store private keys and sign transactions. And actually, as interfaces for interacting with a mobile phone, there's the camera. We scan QR codes and exchange information via QR codes. And NFC is also an additional interface, simply for convenience. You can choose any of these interfaces. And we planned for our device to be 3 millimeters thick. In fact, we weren't able to achieve this for one simple reason. Initially, we planned for 3 millimeters, but ended up with 4. And the display we used turned out to be thicker than we expected. But I truly believe that we will solve this thickness issue very soon, because over the course of this year, we have finally found a reliable vendor who makes displays of exactly the thickness we genuinely need. So even now, if we talk about it, I'd say that my own personal expectations were actually exceeded when we managed to make the device just 1 millimeter thicker.
That's awesome. So, as I understand it, what crypto wallets are currently on the market? Ledger?
Yes.
Who else do they have?
Well, among the very top ones, I'd certainly say it's Ledger and Trezor.
Trezor?
Yes, those are the most popular ones. There's also Safepal now.
Safepal, right? That one too. Let's focus on these three. I've heard of all three. What truly makes your cold wallet significantly different and distinct from these three other options, both visually in its design and technically in its underlying functionality and security features?
And then I'll go a bit deeper and talk about each of the existing ones. Ledger, Trezor, these are competitors that I would say were historically the first to appear on the market. And accordingly, they were more focused on the classic blockchain, that is Bitcoin.
Yes.
If we are talking about external design, then, for example, Ledger and Trezor are devices that look more like a flash drive and are connected to a laptop via a cable. I mean, right now, this probably applies more to Trezor. It connects exclusively to a laptop via cable. And if we talk about Ledger, Ledger went a little further. They equipped their device with a small battery, and they added Bluetooth to it. And basically now Ledger can connect to a mobile phone. So basically, at least something has moved a little bit toward improving the user experience. If we talk about interacting with the wallet, both wallets, and probably Safepal as well, are equipped with a very, very tiny display, just 1.4 inches, and buttons. And honestly, the user experience itself, come on guys, let's be open and honest. The first iPhone came out, if I remember correctly, in 2007 or 2008. And well, as of today, it's been, over 15 years since mobile phones with a primary touchscreen interface have existed. And so when, let's say let's take 2022, for example, right? Or say in 2021, we see a device in a flash drive form factor with a tiny display and a couple of buttons. And when you need to enter an 8-digit PIN code.
I struggled, to be honest. Sorry for interrupting. I actually bought myself a Ledger And when I was generating my seed phrase, well, not generating, but restoring it, it was a whole quest for me. I mean, having to select a word on that tiny screen, pick out each letter, and I realized it was taking a really long time. Am I right in understanding that your device is the first one to have a camera?
Actually, it's not the first device. We do have competitors. If we look back a bit, Safepal is actually the same type of wallet, equipped with a camera and operating on a fully air-gapped principle, meaning it has no radio interfaces, that is, no wireless interfaces. There is its predecessor, Keystone, which also operates using QR codes, that is, with the use of a camera. There are actually other competitors as well who already use similar interfaces for interaction. So in this case, we are probably not pioneers. That's why it's probably better to talk about how we differ from our competitors, right? The main focus, of course, was on the device's compactness and its security. In this case, we're not just talking about security. As for the firmware, that is the device's software and internal components. But here we're also talking about the fundamental fact that, in general, when it comes to meticulously designing and developing sophisticated devices of this particular kind, such as advanced electronics, it's inherently about electronics. Accordingly, these electronic components, much like any other sensitive electronic equipment, are potentially and inherently susceptible to the detrimental effects of moisture and eventual operational failure. And that's why when your device's main purpose is to serve as a safe that essentially stores access to all your assets, we have to say that the physical device itself must be sufficiently robust and at the same time water resistant. Honestly, I have to say, when we started the project, I couldn't find a single device on the market among competitors that was water resistant. Let's just imagine. At that time, I imagined a simple situation. People would come to Bali with their laptops and they would say that after living in Bali for about 6 months, their laptop would inevitably die.
Yes, that's true. I agree.
Why does this happen? It's all very simple. In Bali, the humidity level is 100%. Accordingly, a device that isn't protected from moisture will, of course, break down very quickly. So for me, the main task became to create a device that doesn't have a single opening, not for charging, not for buttons, nothing like that, where potentially
Moisture could get in.
moisture could get in, yes. So I envisioned that our device should be able to survive a cycle in a washing machine.
A typical problem, you can keep it alive just...
Yes, why not? Well, basically, those were the tasks I was facing. So from a technical standpoint, fitting everything into the form factor of a bank card, making the device as thin as possible, and still equipping it with a camera. But I would put it this way. For me as an engineer, first and foremost, it was a real challenge. But I'm serious, it really was a challenge. First of all, to make a device with a thickness of, well, let's say we even went a bit over 4 millimeters, right? 4 millimeters instead of 3. And to have a display, touchscreen, battery, and even a wireless charging antenna inside. And all of that stacked together like a sandwich. That was quite difficult. And finding a camera small enough for such a thin device was also quite a challenge. But basically, all these technical problems were actually solved, and the device we have now doesn't have a single port, and all the functionality we originally planned really works. So it charges
That's awesome.
wirelessly using wireless charging. There's a tiny camera, a very small camera module that's only 2.4 millimeters high. We had to research for a really long time. It probably took us about 4 long and dedicated months to meticulously find the absolutely right and perfect solution. And it's just really, truly cool and incredibly satisfying when you're actually making a physically secure and robust device. We also equipped it with Gorilla Glass on both sides. That is, it's toughened tempered glass that basically won't let it break. There are no moving parts, so it's just glass and a touchscreen. Even if you scratch up the device, nothing will happen to it. You'll always be able to use it. The display uses electronic ink, which helps preserve battery life for a long time, and accordingly, it consumes very little power. That's why this solution was chosen, because from the very beginning, we had very strict requirements for the dimensions.
Minimal.
Yes, we needed to ensure minimal dimensions. Those were some serious requirements, and that's why we decided to use a small battery. It's only 0.8 millimeters thick. So overall, it was quite an interesting, I would say, an interesting engineering challenge. As for the software, we actually focused on some very unique features specific to DeFi, that is for the DeFi sphere. And in particular, we wanted to create a device that would be so to speak, powered by the community. That is to get a kind of community drive, because it's great when you come up with ideas in your head, but the best product is the one that people actually want. And the very first thing I did when I was in Lisbon, after Sergey and I had talked about how it would be quite nice to make a wallet, and I readily agreed to join the project, was to say that I just wanted to talk to the founders of different projects, to regular everyday people, and gather the initial feedback from users, what they don't particularly like right now, and what they would really like to improve. And basically, that was kind of the first building block, I would say, the initial input data when writing the technical specifications for the device we started developing. And now we still stick to that same concept. We're making a device for the community. Any new features we want to introduce, we first share with the community, test them out, and see whether they're actually needed or not. And when we get clear feedback from the community, we make a decision about whether or not to implement a particular feature. And I believe that's actually the main task of our team, to create a product that's based on deep feedback coming from the needs of the community.
From a live audience that uses the product on a daily basis?
Yes, exactly. Those who use it every day. That's right. From this, we've come up with some interesting features, like, for example, multi-seed. This shouldn't be confused with multisig. It's a feature that allows you to create several wallets with different seed phrases on a single device. As of today, there are no competitors on the market who have implemented this feature. I can't say that this is, let's say, a technically complex feature. No, not at all. Most likely, this feature should probably be considered from the point of view a feature. I can't say that it's, let's say, a technically complex feature. No, not at all. Most likely, this feature should be considered from a marketing perspective. Every existing wallet on the market today is a wallet that allows you to create only one wallet with a single seed phrase.
Yes.
And that just further drives up demand. Well, let's imagine a situation. Let's say I'm just an ordinary user, for example, a regular crypto user. Suppose I have, I don't know, 3 or 4 wallets. I don't have huge budgets, and I face the task of securely storing my, even if small, assets, but I need to buy 3 or 4 devices for my wallets. And I think that's just unfair to users. I mean, we have all the technical capabilities to create a feature in a single device that would allow you to store several wallets with different seed phrases. But as it stands, manufacturers today are forcing users to buy 3 or 4 ledgers. If we calculate the budget, let's say, just for example, right? One cold wallet costs, roughly speaking, I don't know, $80 if you buy 4 wallets. So you end up spending $320 on these 4 wallets. In our case, you buy one device and you can store those 4 wallets in a single device. Of course, some people might say, well, how can that be? Here, it turns out that security is reduced because you're not diversifying, so to speak, your risks. Yes, your risks. That is, your assets are stored exclusively on one device. But come on, guys. In this case, as an alternative, when you have several wallets stored on a hot wallet, right, on your phone. Storing several wallets, but on a cold wallet, on a hardware wallet, is much safer. I agree, you could break or lose one device and so on. But if you're simply choosing between the two, as they say, it's the lesser of two evils. When your only option is to create 4 wallets on your phone in a hot wallet, it's less secure because the device is always online and you're potentially vulnerable to hacking. And when you have a dedicated device that can create those same 4 wallets, first of all, you become, let's say, more protected and confident that your assets won't disappear from your cold wallet. That's one. And the second point, at the very least, if we're talking about, let's say, the budget segment for people who care about security, who value the protection of their assets, and who understand what security means, accordingly, this is kind of an alternative route where you can spend, I would say, several times less money by not having to buy multiple devices, but just purchasing a single device. I would say this feature might be somewhat controversial, at least from the perspective of some users in the community, but I personally think it's definitely useful. Additionally, as I previously mentioned, most digital wallets available today are primarily focused on the classic, well-established blockchains. This specifically means popular and widely adopted networks such as Ethereum, Bitcoin, and in fact, both the Ethereum network and other Ethereum-like networks tend to pass transactions very poorly and inefficiently. In particular, no one passes the call data of transactions, and often, for example, Ledger, due to its small screen, doesn't even have the ability to display the full transaction information. And often, for Ethereum transactions, it just displays a little triangle with an exclamation mark. Are you willing to agree to a blind signature of the transaction, so-called blind signing? And from this perspective, it turns out there is no solution to this problem. So on our part, we decided that yes, we need to work in this direction and finally at least try to solve it. Well, it's clear that as of today, in order to parse the call data and present transaction information to the user as clearly as possible, we have to do an enormous amount of work on our end. And considering that we also don't have internet access, it's quite difficult for us to create any blacklists and so on. But we've focused on the main, I would say, smart contracts that people, roughly speaking, use every day, and at least tried to prevent some mistakes with these key smart contracts.
Now, regarding mistakes, recently people have been very concerned about the situation with Ledger. It seemed like everyone was buying it, relying on the fact that it's a cold wallet and the keys are only with me. Then suddenly this interesting news comes out, a backup function. Do you have anything like that in your cold wallet's functionality?
Actually, if we look a little bit further ahead and discuss some truly exciting upcoming features. But first, in fact, I regrettably missed one very important and crucial point. Since we say that we're making a wallet for DeFi and for the community, we're an open source project, and accordingly, all the code we write will be published in a repository on GitHub, and any user will be able to actually see what's going on in our firmware, in our code. Accordingly, this serves as an additional preventive measure to
Cool.
the user can independently verify it so that the user has as much trust as possible. Of course, I understand that most competitors have completely proprietary closed code and it's not open source, so it basically looks like a black box. And this is exactly the kind of situation we saw with Ledger, when at first we were told that Ledger is an extremely secure device that doesn't store your seed phrase, but only stores essentially the private key. But maybe I'll talk a bit here about the technical side, the algorithm, right? First, the seed phrase is generated, and then based on the seed phrase, the private key is generated. And at the moment when the seed phrase was generated, the user was prompted to write it down, to make a backup of this seed phrase. Next, according to the algorithm, or rather according to the logic that was originally explained to us, the private key should be generated from the seed phrase, and the seed phrase should be deleted entirely. And the private key should be placed in secure storage, that is to say, in a particular kind of secure storage that exists directly on the device itself. And accordingly, when you possess the private key, there is absolutely no conceivable way, there is no technical possibility whatsoever to derive the original seed phrase back from the private key at all. And accordingly, Ledger told us that they actually store the private key. And this update, well, basically they said that the private key never leaves the device since, as they claimed, there is no technical way for it to do so. And in this case, of course, it was quite a serious surprise for the community when we were told, guys, the private key never leaves the device, there is no such function. And then they immediately say, here's a firmware update, please install it, and then you'll be able to extract your seed phrase from the device and send it to some remote server. And of course, now I understand the community's concern. How is this possible? You promised us.
Yeah, exactly.
You promised us. You told us it would never leave the device. And in principle, there shouldn't even be a technical possibility to store the seed phrase. You only store the private key, but it turns out that's not the case, guys. It turns out we are storing the seed phrase. And it seems that this capability has always been there, always, yes, but we just don't know about it since it's basically a black box again. I'll get back to that statement. It's a black box to us, and there's no way for us to see what code is inside. And it's possible technically, but as we know, there are always some engineering functions and they're hidden, right? We'll never know about these hidden engineering functions. Well, unless they're written in the user manual, we'll never find out about them. It's the same as, for example, how every phone has engineering codes like star, pound, 06, pound. That's the identification number. Yes, the unique one. We can check the device and I'll say more. Having worked for several years as a service engineer repairing mobile phones, I can tell you that there are actually a lot more of these codes. There are internal hidden service tests and access to a secret engineering menu and so on. But the average user, I'll repeat once again, simply doesn't know about this. So in this case, when we have a device with closed source code, we're basically just taking their word for it. That's it. For our part, we strive to be as open as possible and are creating the device based on the wishes of the community with completely open source code. And not just open source code. I will also open up access to the hardware so that, well, maybe someone will want to build it at home, flash the firmware, and basically recreate the device. That will be possible as well.
You really, really sold it. Honestly, you sold me on it. Now, the most important question, when can we buy it?
As of today, development is in an active phase. Right now, as I mentioned, at the end of February, we released the engineering version of the device, and at the moment we're working very, very closely on the device firmware and on the version that's already, I'd put it this way, there are stages of development, right? So these exist, let's call them that. There are several EVT, DVT, and PVT, and that's when mass production begins. So basically, we completed EVT1, and right now we're at the EVT2 stage. The next stage for us is DVT, Design Verification Test, where we check the entire design to make sure it meets our expectations, and then we can send it to the factory and essentially produce the first batch there. So PVT is, I would say, the production verification test, when we check that it's suitable for manufacturing. That's it. I believe that we'll finish the development of EVT2 in the near future. Well, I'd put it this way. The next version of the engineering prototype, because after the conference in Denver, we received feedback and realized that we should make some changes to our device, specifically related to backups. First, we want to implement backups via NFC. There will be a feature available that will allow, right at the moment when the seed phrase is generated, when the user is prompted to write it down on paper, as an alternative, there will be an option to do a comprehensive backup to an external NFC card and securely encrypt it with a robust PIN code. Moreover, I would certainly say that having a highly responsive touchscreen display, a fairly large and impressive one at 2.7 inches, allows us to seamlessly implement a full and complete keyboard with clearly visible letters in both upper and lower case, providing an intuitive and efficient user experience. Numbers and special characters as well. And, so to speak, make the personal identification number, PIN code, more secure and robust. And in fact, based on this highly secure and unique PIN code, we will proceed to encrypt the sensitive seed phrase and then securely transmit it via near-field communication, NFC technology, to the external hardware card, ensuring maximum data protection and integrity. This is, I would say, one of those nice features as well. That's it. Well, in general,
Are we expecting it this year?
this year, I think we'll finish the work by the end of the year, and I believe that at the beginning of next year, we'll be ready to move on to mass production.
Awesome. Really awesome. I usually ask all my guests a very important question at the end of the show because we have a very interesting audience watching us. These are crypto enthusiasts who believe in crypto and blockchain as a technology and as a way to earn money. I'd like to get some advice from you. What would you like to wish to crypto enthusiasts who are just starting out on their journey?
Just starting out on their incredible journey. Well, I truly believe that cryptocurrency is the undeniable future of global finance. And actually, if we take a moment to look back a little, to reflect on the journey that has led me to this very point, a profound question arises. Why am I even here in this specific moment and place? And how does this entire experience, in some truly significant and fundamental ways, align so perfectly with my deeply held personal values and core beliefs? I've always, ever since I first embarked on the entrepreneurial path and started doing business, from the very moment I officially opened my first limited liability company, which, if I recall correctly, was probably about 10 years ago now, maintained a consistent approach. Right away, I asked myself a very important question that I think was quite relevant and pertinent at that particular time. Why should I open a business account at a traditional bank for my company and effectively hand over my hard-earned money for someone else to securely keep? And I was very clear about one fundamental thing. When you give your valuable money to a bank for safekeeping, you basically, as they say, hand over virtually all control of your finances to the bank, or essentially to various third parties. And as a result, you might earn some money, but at any moment your account could simply be blocked. And when I found out about the concept of blockchain, I realized that this is truly the future. And of course, I understand that, so to speak, crypto can be looked at from different perspectives. As many people often say, crypto is frequently perceived as a primary tool for various criminals, for unscrupulous scammers who actively buy and sell illicit drugs, dangerous weapons and other illegal items and services using these digital currencies. Of course, that may be the case, but it's the same as, I don't know, looking at a kitchen knife. On one hand, it's an everyday tool. I would even say kitchenware, right? Something we basically can't live without. But on the other hand, it's a weapon. Well, that's really how it is. It's simply a matter of purpose. How is it used? It's about someone's intentions, right? How can we use it? With blockchain, I think it's exactly the same. That is, if we're talking about peaceful uses like peaceful nuclear energy, you can make a bomb or you can build a nuclear power plant that supplies electricity to a large number of people and brings benefits. It's the same with blockchain. I saw for myself that this is truly a powerful and innovative tool that can allow individuals to preserve their valuable assets and not hand them over to external third parties. In other words, not let these third parties manage their hard-earned savings and accumulated wealth. Well, like it was, for example, in Russia during the revolutionary times when there was simply dispossession. Someone would work hard, earn something through their own labor, the labor of their family, their own intelligence, and accumulate some assets. And then someone would come and say, no, man, none of this is yours.
Now things are different.
Yeah, none of this is yours anymore. Now it's mine. And of course, well, I'd say I'm actually a descendant of those who survived the dispossession. And I think that in fact there are even some kind of ancestral programs, like a response to that. Why is there such injustice? And I found for myself a kind of window of opportunity to create a project for the blockchain that would help people preserve their assets. So for those individuals who are just starting to delve into the world of cryptocurrency, I genuinely believe that this represents the absolutely correct path, the most appropriate direction to pursue. And these individuals can be absolutely and unequivocally sure that if they diligently keep their valuable assets within the crypto ecosystem and actively get involved in this burgeoning field, even at the very least, simply utilizing it as a fundamental and essential tool for the systematic accumulation and careful preservation of their financial assets, then I would confidently assert that they, along with their future descendants, will undoubtedly have a remarkably bright and prosperous future stretching out ahead of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexey.
You're very welcome.
That was really great. It was a great conversation. We learned a lot of new things. We finally got to see the founder of 1inch Hard Wallet in person. So I want to say thank you for being with us today. Subscribe to our channel.
Thank you guys for inviting me. Yes, it was a real pleasure to chat and actually share a bit about the project in person and what's happening with it right now.